Welcome back to Rubberducking Podcast, everyone. I am your host, Charles.
I am your co-host, Mike.
Welcome, Mike.
There we go.
All
Season
right.
3?
Season 3, right? Season 3, episode 1. So we've filmed, season 1, episode 20, like 20 episodes. Season 2, 20 episodes. Now we're kind of like transitioning into talking more about like the general, like a broad North Korean issues and stories, whereas we've been really focusing a lot on my personal stories and like my personal experience. But yeah, it's not like we're going to move away from that. It's always going to evolve around my personal experience, right? Since we're not the I guess like the we're not the experts, right?
No,
the
far
North
from
Korean
it.
issues,
Far from
right?
it. Yeah,
Right,
absolutely.
but the hope is that as we talk about, my personal experience and perhaps your experience in South Korea too, that kind of brings in the light to North Korean issues. Speaking of which, I kind of want to talk about the North Korean ship kind of like flipping over, right? So here's the thing, right? Like I personally don't like talking about politics that much. Right.
Really?
Because, well, I mean, because like I don't know, I'm not a good when it comes to politics, it just like my head hurts. But also at the same time, like when you talk about North Korea or things like this, like the politics, I think it's kind of like inevitably comes up.
Of course.
Right. Like even it's like, even if it's like North Korean politics or even if it's American politics, it comes up anyway. Right.
Yeah, I mean, they're really close to each other. And of course, everyone thinks North Korea, the communist country, there is a lot of fears or awareness about not letting America turn communist or socialist.
Right.
So I think it's bound to come up.
Right. And especially with the recent, I mean like since 2018, right? Like Trump visiting North Korea. And
oh, yeah, that's right.
Like, I mean, North Korea have been on the news a lot
That
lately.
is true.
And also the ship actually flipping over.
That made the headlines again.
Yeah, it actually made headlines again. And which was, I think that's also when like my video, I guess, also kind of like ticked us a little bit.
Interesting. Is there a little correlation there?
TikTok
okay.
and
so whenever North Korea gets attention, Charles North Korea, aptly named, also gets attention.
But also here's the interesting bit too. So since last October, I have been posting videos on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram and things like that, right?
Yeah.
And the most searched word, right? Well, I guess not most searched word, but North Korea was most searched in the October of last year.
Oh, interesting. Well, what happened in October of last year?
I started posting.
Yeah.
Actually, our producer.
Are you taking credit here?
But actually, my producer just told me about that too. It's like, hey, so I'm not sure if it's like a funny coincidence or not. But since we started posting like in October, like North Korea actually that like October of last year was the most like searched. Not in the history, but I think it's just that year. So
interesting. Most searched in terms of
like North Korea, like Google search, like North Korea.
So the search started spiking up a little bit more.
Yeah, in October.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Interesting. All right.
Towards the end of the year, but going back to the flipping ship.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you, listeners, for joining us again on season 3, and maybe letting Charles getting the attention that he needs to bring awareness. But onto the ship.
Yes. Yeah. So here's the thing too, like I think North Korea have never actually built that big of a ship before.
That's right. This was their second
largest
ship. So it's they always have ships have classes, right? So they build their first ship of the same class, and then there are multiple of that ship that's built, and they kind of iterate over time.
Yeah,
and they already have this flagship already built, so that they have a first one out there. And then this was a second one.
I see.
Yeah. And it's the biggest they've built so far.
Right. So it's the biggest one they've built so far.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really interesting for me to learn that, North Korean ship flipped over and a bunch of people are going to get in trouble for it. Right. And Kim Jong-un is not going to let this slide. And I think so far, I mean, it happened like a couple of weeks ago. It happened last week? Yeah, it happened last week.
Yeah.
Right?
What was your initial reaction listening to this news?
I was like, oh my God, bunch of people are going to die.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah,
you think they're gonna get executed for the mistake?
Yeah. I think Kim Jong-un already acted on punishing whoever was in charge of
Uh-huh.
that ship operation, right?
Right.
And also
at
I heard
least
that they're
arrested or
salvaging,
something?
arrested,
Uh-huh.
and they are trying to salvage, or they're trying to rescue the ship, right? They're in process of rescuing it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that made me think about like the legitimacy of North Koreans, like the military power in the first place, right?
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
please tell us more.
right, because we haven't actually talked much about military power on this podcast. I
No,
don't
that is
think.
true. I don't think we did a whole
Yeah,
lot.
so
Yeah.
so just like talking generally, broadly about North Korean military power, and I think that's what our like listeners are most curious about too. Is
Oh,
that like
okay.
if there is gonna be a war,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
Is North Korea capable of nuking America, right? Which,
Uh-huh.
like, I'm gonna tell you, spoiler alert.
Yeah.
I doubt that they have the ability to do so. Maybe
Mm.
South Korea, maybe,
Uh-huh.
right? But that in itself is it's already like a suicide mission, right? To begin with, right? And on top of that, like I've also heard this like a news about North Korean missiles being found on the Ukraine land,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
land of Ukraine, and the missiles were unexploded because
Right.
it's been damaged,
Right.
and like it's not that good. Right?
Right.
It's found to be there's a water in it and whatnot.
Mhm.
So speaking of that, like I doubt the legitimacy of North Korean military power. You know, like
Uh-huh.
in Korean term, we have this thing called tiger without tooth, like a
I
이빨
see.
없는 봄,
Uh-huh.
right?
Or like paper tiger.
Paper tiger,
Yeah.
yeah, the tiger that cannot bite in a
Uh-huh.
way. Like it's kind of, yeah, sure. North Korea doesn't have like building that big of experience in building that big of a ship before,
That's right.
right?
It's their
And
first
I
time.
doubt
Uh-huh.
that like I don't think they ever built a fighter jet either. Like, do you think
No,
they
I don't think so. No, North Korea never
right?
built a fighter jet. In fact, the most up to date, top of the line, uh, aircraft, right? The fighter aircraft that is defending Pyongyang, which is their capital, right? The capital defense. Those are, I believe, like at best 1980s Soviet MiG-29s,
Right.
which are already
I see. It's like
yeah,
a mid
behind.
1990s.
Right, yeah, maybe at best 1990s. So they don't have the top of the line, Sukhoi 35s or
Right.
any of those.
Yeah.
So that kind of tells you when it comes to the air power, North Korea is definitely far behind. They don't have means to have chance at a winning fight. Really,
Right. Right. Yeah. So I think yeah, that's what like most listeners are curious about, and I can tell you that like. Yeah, I don't think North Korea is capable of actually participating in like technologically modern warfare. You know?
Right,
Like,
in terms of the at least like a traditional warfare where it's an all-out war, right? The land, sea, and air, all the power together. I mean, it probably can't.
Right, and think about it. North Korea tried to show off something like in a big news.
That's true. They do parade every year, right?
Right,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, the ship actually just flopped over. And just that just made a huge headline of the worldwide, and it's just like a big, like a slap on the Kim Jong Un's face. Right.
That is true, and there are a lot of because of there has been a lot of attention on the ship. A lot of analysis that was done around it also became a little more public, or just because, or maybe some of the those internet experts or people who have been to the military are reporting on the fact that if you look down on the satellite images, even before it flipped over, like you can actually look quite far down its like smokestacks. And there were some people asking, like, does that even have an engine installed at this point? Or are they... And also, if you take a look at how quickly those ships of the same classes were, put in the water and ready for service, even looking at South Korea, and South Korea has a huge shipbuilding industry. They build like cruise ships, they build huge oil tankers. Even they took time to get those ships into service from one after another. But North Korea did it really fast. So, there is some, at least... skepticism is like, are they actually building a real thing that is ready to go into service,
I see.
or is it just the empty hall
Yeah.
they wanted to show off to the rest of the world?
Yeah, I actually was thinking about that too, and
Mm.
I think I've heard that from like nknews.org, I think.
Oh yeah.
And I was reading about that, and there was like a question on the legitimacy of how reliable like the North Korean regime is claiming that the ship can actually fight.
Right.
Right. And which I also personally, don't really believe that yet they finished building it.
Right.
Because they don't have resources to do so. Sure, North Korean regime do make money,
Mhm.
right? But it's not a lot of money that can. Yeah, I just don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, I think I also have a corroborating, at least the eyewitness report, and this is a little bit dated. This was so this is a lady who worked for the North Korean regime and the newspaper for a really long time, and she worked specifically for the military and science, the National Defense Science like ministry or department, reporting on all the achievements. So she got to actually meet the Kim family.
Oh, wow.
She got to go in and be part of the missile manufacturing process. And this is kind of, I remember, I forget her name, but this is what I remember her saying is that, and she has really great like precise insights on these, which I think to me sound very logical. If you look at the North Korean industry, they can't, this is what she said, I don't know if this is true still, but they cannot manufacture eyeglasses. Right, those all come from China, and because something like optics, right, you have to carve the glass or these kind of lenses to a very precise angle. You have to make them all fit into the frames. Like that requires some technology. Of course, like we take it for granted in the first world here. But think about it, right? This is what she said. Like North Korea, a country that cannot even manufacture eyeglasses on their own technology. How well would they build these precise missiles? And again, she kind of escaped in the 90s, so perhaps things have changed. But at the time, and remember, in the 60s, the space, right, the moon was already conquered by the United States, right?
I'm conquered by the United States.
We're not conquered.
Are you sure that wasn't fake?
Yeah, conquered is probably too strong a word, but the space travel was figured out,
right, by the United States.
And this lady, right, who was a reporter, says that when she went into the missile factory, you would think that there would be a lot of robots or machines. It was just like people, North Korean scientists with sandpaper, like sandpapering the surface of the missile to make sure it's smooth. That's what she reported.
No way.
So it's I think they have caught up. And one thing that I would say though is that the reason why South Korea or even Japan or even United States should still be a little bit wary is that that's why Kim Jong-un is so focused on nuclear weapons or things like dirty bombs, biohazard weapons, because
he wants to play dirty. He doesn't want to play like
because he can't win if he plays fair. It's just not going to work out. He doesn't have there are people. Some people question if a war were to begin, can the North Korean tanks actually come down past the border because they don't have enough fuel. A lot of people steal those fuel to make money in the black market. Replace it with oil. It's going to break down the engine.
That's right.
Not to mention that these are like T-55s. These are from
really older, like old
the Cold War tanks.
Actually, here's the thing too. Like I've never seen because I'm from a little town in Tangjin. Right? That's when I'm not sure. The Westerners knows it as the Chosin Reservoir, right? It's the Tangjin Hobanjeon 2.
Okay.
So Chosin Reservoir, where supposedly like Vietnam has like the Saigon, right? That's where the Marines lost. But like Korean War, it's the Chosin Reservoir, right? So it's one of the most well defended kind of area, right? Okay. And that's where the Air Force is too. I grew up nearby Air Force, and supposedly they have like tanks too. But every time I go to school and come back, like we used to pass by those like Air Force bases as well, like next to it.
Yeah.
And I would see a lot of planes that were made out of wood.
Oh,
like
those are mock-ups.
Yeah, the mock-up planes.
To make it look like they have a lot of planes.
And and at the time too, I was like really curious about like, I wonder why they would have this kind of fake cars, fake planes, fake tanks. It's like I'm not really sure. Maybe just just for fun. But now I came to America, right? Like many years later, and then I actually look on the Google map, and then I can zoom in and start. Oh, that looks like a convincing plane.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, never mind. I remember seeing that as a kid. Like it's like a paper, like it's like a wood planes and tanks and cars.
Right.
So so that's why it's like, like like from coming from like personal experience and personal witness, it's like, do they really have the power? I don't think so.
Right.
Not really. And also here's another kind of like thing too, is that another evidence is that like North Korean soldiers, right? They were forced to go to military at the age of 17, right? If you're able.
Yeah.
Right? Unless you're like terminally ill or you have
missing limbs,
missing limbs. And if you're if you're not in that category, you have to serve in the military for 12 years, right? And North Korean like regime struggles to feed its people, and they're taking their food away from the people to feed military.
Right.
But there is still a taryong, right? And there's still a lot of like
deserters,
and there's a lot of a lot of conflicts within the military because of the lack of resources and lack of food.
They're not being fed well.
They're not being fed well. They are not being clothed well. They're not being. They don't even have enough resources to train.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I believe that half of the North Korean military carries around empty guns because there is
not
no ammunition to go around.
Now that they sent it all to Russia.
I mean, that's another thing too, right?
Right. Yeah.
So by looking at that, like I just don't think that North Korea has the enough military power to begin with. But it's just that, just like you mentioned, like Kim Jong-un wants to play dirty. He's just so focusing on nuclear weapons and just doing everything they can to put all the manpower and the resources in developing this nuclear weapons so that they can be recognized as like a nuclear holding like a state. Right. And once that happens, then the world would just, or America at least, right, just leave them alone. But I push in a way that we shouldn't allow them to do that, right? Like I'm in a place where, this is my personal opinion,
right?
Like I'm not. This is not a. If you're a government official and listening to this podcast, it's not a recommendation. It's not. I'm not it's like condoning at all. But why don't you push the limit? Like why don't we see? Like okay, if you want to go ahead and do that, just try and do that. See what happens, right? Like,
tell us more. What do you mean? Like push North Korean regime?
Yeah, push North Korean regime.
Okay.
Like we would make a threat.
Oh, I see.
Like if you do that, like America or the UN,
like the 7th Fleet of the American Navy like shows up at its doors,
right? Like like what happened to Japan, right? Like if you don't open up, we're going to go to war.
Oh, I see,
bro.
What do you think the response would be for North Korea if that were to happen? Just again, purely hypothetical scenarios like this. There's so much room for lives lost and bloodbath. Yeah. So we're not.
This is zero gravity.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's no weight on. We were just kind of thinking about what if scenarios that we never want to make happen because of course like we're talking about like American lives on the line. So shouldn't happen. But if it were to, like maybe not even American lives, but let's say South Korean president takes a really radical stance and stations all of its military right up against the borders. What do you think North Korea would do?
First, North Korean people will be really happy.
Oh, that's an unexpected response.
No.
Really?
The reason is because, right, the running joke inside of North Korea was like, 전쟁 일어나겠으면 빨리 일어나라.
Really? They want the war to happen.
Yeah, because they're starving.
If it's just a matter of time.
Right, it's just a matter of time. And here is the reason, too, is that the reason why North Korean people are starving, right, for generations now, it's because we're trying to defend ourselves from Americans, right?
Oh, so that will mark the end of the suffering.
Yeah. So that would actually stop, stop like military from draining all of their resources, right? So, there is a running joke inside of North Korea. It's like, oh yeah, if there is gonna be a war, just let it happen.
Wow.
Like, let's get it over with already.
Wow.
It's that way, right? That's the reason number one.
That is reasonable.
Reason number two, right, is because North Korean military have been abused really bad by their superiors.
That's right.
Right? And there is also there's also a running joke within the military.
Oh.
If there's going to be a war, 90% of their military will actually
just throw up a white flag and walk to the south.
No. They will turn their gun
against
their
their superiors. Oh my goodness, that's worse.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So
it's a time to pay back.
right, exactly.
Whoa.
So that's what I think it's gonna happen.
So the military will just implode from the inside.
Exactly. Yeah. So sure, like if that were to ever happen, right? If South Korea would pull up with those tanks, and
like all
ships
all the Air Force planes,
everything they've got to North Korea. Like sure, Kim Jong Un was like, so we're gonna show up with everything we've got, blah blah, like missiles, nuclear.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, yeah, that's
so
good way to get erased off the map. That's the risk they have, right? At the end of the
well,
day.
yeah, I mean that's the risk of it, but come on,
just the people just won't listen. It's like I just want to eat food. And, screw this guy that's been screwing me over. Yeah, there's a really interesting comment that we got from legendary. I can't quite read. Macau. What if the invasion fleet just ate food on the boats and didn't attack? So the 7th Fleet of the United States Navy, with all of its aircraft carriers, they just come out onto the deck and just start barbecuing really hard.
Right, we've got great
fan the
food
smell
here.
into
that was actually saddest part about too. Like I guess not saddest part, but I mean that's what kept me going when I was in that. Like right as I was trying to cross the river, right? And at night I was like hiding,
on the North Korean side,
the North Korean side, and just like lying down and listening to like the water, just like, and then eventually like it's a casual periodical smell of like meat coming over from China.
The waft of barbecue.
Yeah, and that was that's what kept me going. So that's legendary Moscow. I think that's a good idea. It's like showing off like we have like such a great party.
Yeah, no, funny
here.
You mentioned that because South Korea has this as a tactic. The loudspeakers are facing the
North Korea. And actually North Korea employs the same tactic as well. They actually do like to South Korea it's like 타령하십시오. 여기 우리 조선민주주의 인민공화국으로 와주십시오.
Did you know that they recently switched to just like noise?
White noise?
Yeah, it's just like weird noises.
Interesting.
To try to mask out the South Korean broadcast. So they talk about, they just play like K-pop and like news forecasts. I heard that that's another thing that is quite impressive to the North Korean soldiers on the border. Essentially, South Korea is just playing regular radio for the most part. But what is really crazy to the North Korean soldiers, I hear, is that like, oh, hey, tomorrow's weather's gonna be this and that. And then North Korean soldiers, see it happen. And they're like, whoa, how did they know?
Yeah. It's like, whoa, they have like this kind of technology. And North Korean people really don't know that. Because
right,
I grew up in a
black and white
to
make
TV.
that happen.
Yeah, I grew up in a black and white TV and a car battery.
So obviously a lot of this is propaganda news, but what I remember, like every news channel that you listen to here too in the United States, like at the end is always the sports, and then it talks about the weather.
Oh.
So does the North Korean TV tell you anything about the weather tomorrow?
It actually does. Yeah.
Okay.
Like a 28 Celsius, 27 Celsius. Yeah.
And did you find it to be somewhat accurate?
I can't remember.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was really young.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe it's maybe for at least in the areas where the border town, it's not as close to the Pyongyang.
Yeah.
Whatever they get is not as accurate. But yeah, of course, those things have worked. And what is interesting about that is North Korea gets quite upset about those broadcasts. They have
South Korea.
Yeah, and then they have threatened multiple times that they would shoot those loudspeakers and blow them up.
I see. So actually, Kim Jong Un came up with this new law recently. I think it's like a 반동
사상 배격법.
반동 사상 배격법.
Okay.
It's like literally like how'd you know that?
Well, because you sent it to me recently. Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah.
So basically,
it's like
what that is
anti.
Like a
treason,
Western, like a anti like a media, like anti-foreign media.
Okay, so let's try to translate it like literally. So 반동 is like treason. 사상 is ideology. So treasonous ideology. 배격 is like
to punishment.
To punish or to kick out. What's the word for that?
배격. 배격.
Yeah. Prohibition is probably too weak of a word.
Yeah.
But that's the idea, right? So essentially, it's like an anti-treasonous ideology law.
Yeah. That.
And then the anti-treason ideology is what?
Is basically watching foreign media. right? Basically watching foreign media, and they have like multiple different ones. And one of those is like watching foreign media is punishable by death.
Wow. So they
Yeah.
upped it now.
They
from
upped it
even
now.
when you were there.
So when I was there, it's like, oh yeah, like you don't get publicly executed for watching like foreign medias. It's just depending on how many people you watched it with, right?
Mhm.
Like, yes, it would actually happen, but it does not happen as you think, like frequently. It's maybe like once, maybe it happened, you know, because the North Korean regime wanted to make an example out of you. But now they actually doubled down and they upped it and said it's punishable by death. Watching South Korean drama and foreign cultures. There's multiple different laws, but yeah, and I think that's why. And also Kim Jong Un, like since he came to power, like next episode we're gonna talk about cell phones, but
yes.
yeah, next episode we're gonna talk about cell phones. But since Kim Jong Un came to power, like he made some notable changes to North Korea, right? Like the first thing that I actually remember, the very first thing that I've heard from a friend of mine who escaped in 2014, that back then when I was in North Korea, let's talk about like a couple of things, but the first thing was that they actually require, so back then like the farmings, for example, right? They actually require, the government takes about 90%, and then the person actually can take 10%, right?
Wow.
So whenever you're farming, you're actually required to return everything to the government, and then they would give you like rations, right? But now, after Kim Jong Un came to power, he made it 50-50.
Oh, so the people can take more?
People can take more. So 50. So government takes 50. The North Korean regime takes 50.
Why do you think that's the case?
It's because Kim Jong Un knows that like it's yours. Like it's like you have to give people sense of like ownership.
Oh,
whereas like before it's like
90%.
I don't really care. You know, it's like I'm just doing it for work. You know, so I don't really care. Like the bonnet, like you don't really water it well, for example, or you don't really put enough of. So it's more of like.
You know, there is a corroborating evidence. There's another defector who used to work at the Agricultural Centers for Science, or Center for Agricultural Science in North Korea, and he made the discovery by doing a A/B comparison study, because apparently it's a huge deal if you develop a new kind of a breed of rice or corn, so that yield goes up by like 0.5%. But he made a discovery that made the yield go up by multiple digits, which is huge. And then the reason why the yield went up is that he compared to farms where the country owned the land and took everything. And then he also, that's one side. The other side, or the experimental group, was a group that the farmer had ownership over the land and could control the crops. And that made a huge difference in the yield. So now Kim Jong Un is actually taking advantage of it.
He's taking a step towards to that. That I guess like that's what notable change was, right? One notable change that was.
Okay.
And the other notable changes was that North Korea started promoting their own internal like K-pop.
Oh right, I've seen some of those.
In regards
try to
like
compete with some
South Korea. So now, right,
okay,
the girls are more taller, prettier, and they're a little bit more revealing. Than the actual girls
so shorter skirts,
okay. So that was another notable change. And then the other notable change was back in 2018. Can you guess what that is?
No,
it's a cell phone.
They started allowing cell phones.
So it was
2018.
Yeah,
wow.
2018. I think that's when they massively allowing people to actually use cell phones, and they trust me. They have like content like of games on the device, like knockoff games of like Flappy Bird, like 20 different variations of Flappy Bird, Clash of Clans, it's like of course like a clone games, right? We're gonna talk about this more in the next episode.
Yeah, but here's one question before we end it. Just as a little segue to the next episode too, is that maybe we'll just actually not a segue, but a cliffhanger, right? Next episode. We planned these really well. Next episode, I want to ask you.
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen it all. You've seen the foreign media and the real Flappy Bird, and now you're seeing the images of the videos of North Korean Flappy Bird. Would that would that change your mind to just stick with the North Korean content? Would that have changed your mind to just like, actually pick up or like not look at the foreign media? And it's like, no, my regime has enough stuff for me and be satisfied with that. We'd love to hear your thoughts, but that would have to be on the next episode.
That's right. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. We are going to be ending our episode here, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
Alrighty.
Bye-bye.